Good evening, and I would like to I'd like to reconvene the Putnam Valley Board of Education business meeting of November 12th, 2020. Please stand and join me as we salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I'd like to open with the Board of Education. We'll hear public comments on the proposed changes to the district's Code of Conduct. Policies 5300 through 5300.75. The document has been on the district's website for public review and comments for over 30 days. The majority of the updates relate to virtual and in-person learning, as well as updated health protocols. The board will vote on a second reading of these policies this evening, and that will make these policies adopted.
So just to reiterate, most of the updates just cover all of the references to remote learning, something that our old plan certainly did not cover. The fact that our code of conduct also applies to students who are participating in remote instruction, as well as the health safety protocols in terms of mask wearing, health screening, and all of the other provisions in our reopening plan that students are expected to abide by. So the plans were made, as I said, over a month ago and have been available for public comment. So this would be our opportunity to finish that piece and then be able to adopt the new code of conduct.
And Maureen, have we received any comments? Okay. So I would like now to move on and make a resolution to approve the minutes of the business meeting of October 22nd, 2020.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I would like to make the announcement that the treasurer's report for August 2020 is available in the business office. And now, Dr. Luft, I'd like to turn it over to you for our very favorite Pride in Putnam Valley.
Thank you. So this evening, we want to recognize three of our amazing colleagues with the Pride in PV. And unfortunately, they weren't able to be here this evening, but they promised me that they were all watching online. So I still had to say nice things about them. Our school nurses have really been an instrumental part of our reopening plan from in the spring when we began these conversations. And I can promise everyone watching that what they do on a daily basis looks nothing like what their job has been for many, many years. They're coming in early, they're calling families, they're reviewing the student screening document. They've truly, without them, they're the most essential employees we have in our school district. And we would not be open, none of our buildings would be open if it was not for them. We live with a little bit of fear of one of them being quarantined or developing a cold, and our ability to function within our buildings. But I did think that all three of them were well deserving of this distinction and recognition for their work. And we have the great most amount of appreciation for them. So Kathy and Jackie and Tish, we have certificates for you, but again, recognize your efforts and say thank you.
And that moves us to presentations. Would you like to, the first one is introduction of student representatives.
So I promised not to embarrass them, but I did want to at least recognize them. So I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Incheri, Mr. Scampoli, and Parker Sparazza and Jess Walsh, our two student representatives. And we had a great conversation about sort of what the expectations were and how much the board values the input of students. They both seemed eager and willing to fulfill that role. I didn't make a deal with them. They only had to come to each business meeting, so one meeting a month as opposed to two. But I think beginning in December, they'll come prepared with a presentation, or not a presentation, a board report.
Our presentation, yeah.
Unless you want to have a presentation, then you can.
Speeches.
Speeches will come in June at the end of the year. No, but they both seemed, again, very excited to fulfill the role. And again, I very much value their opinions. We spoke about setting up separate meetings with just them and myself, sort of offline, offstage, off-camera meetings to talk about any issues that may be arising, and certainly they have a direct line of communication to me. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they come up with, but I did want to take an opportunity to welcome them both as student representatives to the board. So thank you.
I know that Dr. Luft probably said this to you, but I cannot tell you how welcome your thoughts, ideas, and opinions are. The board really loves to hear from you and to hear from students, and you're going to be their voice. So, welcome.
And if you look at the composition of the board, only one of us still have students in the school as of now. I think many of us were on the board when we did have children in the school. So we don't have that day-to-day. So we're really looking to you to help give us that. So welcome aboard the board. Is that fun? Okay.
So now I'm going to introduce Dr. Doherty, who's going to take us through the different building social emotional learning and counseling plans.
Good evening. So a few weeks ago at the last board meeting, actually, it was asked that to sort of give an update on social emotional learning. As you know, a few years ago, they made some changes to the regulations. So with that, we've sort of added staff and put Ms. Kildoff at the elementary school to really begin to align and to implement a lot of the social emotional learning goals that have been set by the state. And then, of course, there's Ms. Sullivan, who she's our school psychologist. She's not here tonight, but she just had her first baby a few months ago. So we wish her well and certainly didn't want her coming out tonight. And Ms. O'Connell is here as the school psychologist at the elementary school, so they're going to take you through basically what we do in typical times and then how we're responding during these COVID times to the social emotional needs of our students. So I'm going to introduce Ms. Kildoff first, or Ms. O'Connell's first.
Hi.
Hi, Sue.
First, thanks for giving us the opportunity to kind of showcase what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. At the elementary school, as Dr. Doherty said, there's 3 of us. There's 2 psychologists and a guidance counselor. I feel like the addition of the guidance counselor has really been nice in helping us to meet the needs of all students at the elementary school. So I'm going to kind of start by what we kind of do jointly, and then I'll talk a little bit about what the school psychologist's role is, and then Ms. Kildoff will come and talk a little bit about what she does at the elementary school. So how do I get the next slide? Okay. Is that good?
Isn't there like
Yeah.
a present mode? That's what I was wondering.
Okay, so kind of across the board, obviously we do a lot of counseling at the elementary school that consists of different types of counseling. So we do individual counseling with students as needed. That can look anything from meeting with a student a couple of times to meeting with a child for a few weeks to more long-term counseling based upon a student's needs at school, academically, emotionally, socially, even outside of school at times. Sometimes we will incorporate those children into groups of students. So we also run small social skills and counseling groups each week. Those can consist of both general education students and special education students with IEPs. And those consist of we do some like shorter term groups, 10 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks, and then longer term groups that might run throughout the course of the school year to meet specific needs. In addition to groups, we do weekly, there's 2 RTI teams that meet at the elementary school, and we're both a big part of kind of managing the RTI team on a weekly basis. So not only are we part of those teams, we also help to implement interventions into classrooms, into lunch and recess, things like that for students who may need behavioral support, emotional support. A lot of times what we talk about through RTI will give us some of the referrals that we need for counseling, things like that. The third thing, you know, that kind of incorporates, is incorporated on a day-to-day basis is the crisis team work that we do. So we are all members of the crisis team, which meets multiple times throughout the school year. We talk about a variety of things, in particular in terms of, you know, things we need to do to keep the school safe. We do crisis counseling as provided. That may include helping students who are experiencing internal difficulties, may need additional support outside of the school, evaluations, connections to outside sources such as mental health evaluations, things like that, and really helping families navigate that area. Crisis and behavioral intervention really is something that we deal with every day. And, you know, Dr. Doherty and I were really talking about, you know, at any point in the year, something like this can really, you know, take up good portions of our day, especially at the elementary school when we have kids coming in and trying to navigate school for the first time. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about COVID and how that's affected kids, but coming back to school after all of that time off and transitioning back. So that can be a large piece of our day on certain days for sure. Obviously, collaboration with teachers over students of concerns is an ongoing thing, both through RTI and outside of RTI. Parent training and collaboration with parents is done, again, both formally and informally. So we have a lot of conversations with parents, but we also at times will sit on formal parent trainings through IEPs for students with disabilities, specifically autism. I just don't know how to get to the next slide on here.
Different computer.
Yeah.
No,
I
don't
know,
why
that's
it
what I
keeps
did.
doing- yeah. I'm not sure why he keeps doing this. This one.
All right, during this intermission, we're going to need the student board reps. Song and dance, please.
Is there a 12-year-old in me?
Ms. Fry can come up instead. We're back. You're saved.
Okay, thank you. Collaboration with outside agencies and providers as needed. I talked a little bit about that before, but some, you know, CCSI, outside therapists, community resources. We do partner with Co-Care, which is our local mental health agency. Implementation of the Yale Ruler model into the classrooms that we've talked a lot about over the past couple years. And then finally, we do, especially around this time, a lot of coordination with school-wide initiatives. So a lot of that is done through character education, which we're all committee members of. We do initiatives such as a holiday food drive that goes through the Putnam Valley Food Pantry each year. We do a toy drive, which benefits not only our local family, but also a local shelter. We're doing a coat drive this year for children in need. So a lot of things like that we do throughout the year as well. Next slide. Hey, I did it. In terms of school psychologists outside of the realm of things that we do collaboratively, school psychologists are CSE subcommittee chair people. We manage the IEPs for the students with disabilities in the elementary school. We chair the 504 meetings. This will include initial meetings, case management, and annual reviews. All annual reviews and program reviews for CSE and 504 students, and then obviously we do initial and reevaluation testing for classified students.
Okay, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Laura Kilduff, and I am the elementary school counselor. So after spending 18 years at the high school, I was really excited. When this new position was created last year, I jumped at the opportunity because I needed a change. I was really excited about all the things that I thought we could implement at the wonderful elementary school. So with the addition of the position, I've been able to implement a school-wide social emotional learning program. The curriculum that we chose is the Second Step program. So I was able to push into every class about once a month. So I do a grade level per week. And the program is divided into 4 units. There's learning skills, empathy, emotion management, and problem-solving skills. So I was able to work through a lot of the learning skills, empathy, and I was into the emotion management program last year. I plan to pick that up and then focus heavily on the problem-solving along with the emotion management and giving kids real coping skills that they can use when they're experiencing strong emotions or having any sort of emotional difficulty. With the new Erin's Law requirement, Dr. Doherty and Dr. Podesta and I talked about integrating some of the child protection curriculum, which we also purchased through Second Step. So I'll be integrating that as well. The other thing that I really love implementing is some of those short-term support groups. So I think Sue had mentioned we do a lot of like year-long social skills, but last year I offered some short-term programs such as Changing Families for students that come from families of divorce or families that are experiencing separation, or could be a family in the military, any sort of change that's going on. I also implemented a kindergarten friendship group in the middle of the year, and that was to address any kindergarten students that were still having a hard time transitioning, making friends, keeping friends. So that was a great program. And also Worry Warriors to help address any students that are having school phobia or other heightened anxiety issues. And again, we're always reassessing the needs of the students. So this year, I may run the same groups. We may find that there's a need for a grief group or anything really. So that's what's so great about having the elementary school position, for me at least. So some of the things that we had to put into motion pretty quickly when COVID hit, it was really reassessing what we do as a clinical team at the elementary school. Certainly, we've increased our individual counseling. We have more students that have some issues transitioning back to school. We have parents that are concerned about their children. So we do a lot of counseling based on, transitioning back to school, heightened anxiety of both students and parents, and in some case, staff members as well. We focus a lot, especially in the group setting, on safety issues, wearing your mask, social distancing. How do we keep everybody safe and still have our still interact with our friends? Certainly there's family illness or loss, there's concerns or some real issues going on there. Academic changes, a lot of students, even though we continue with the remote learning, some students still struggle to get on the internet, their families, some were home, some are not, so certainly we want to help get them caught up with their academics, and we talk a lot about that through the RTI process. We also, something that we're very proud of is the creation of our Putnam Valley Elementary School Student Services website. And I just want to, hopefully I can click here real quick. So we created this back in March or April just as a way to still provide the same resources and services and activities to families. So I have updated it this year, but especially things like social emotional activities that parents can do with their children at home, different activities, what you can do with your child if they're bored or they're having some difficulty emotionally, calming activities. Sorry. So just a lot of different resources there that we're super proud of. Let me get back to this, I think. Can I get back to the X out? All right, we're good. All right. So that's something that we're going to continue to update because it does provide families with a lot of different information. We also started using Google Classroom, which I never thought as a counselor I would be using. I thought it was really a teacher's tool, but we are finding that it's a great way to still provide activities and lessons for our students that are learning remotely. So for example, I have a 4th grade group that is fully remote, so I use Google Classroom to provide them with different lessons, activities, assignments. I also put all of my students that are in person into a Google Classroom, and I can communicate with parents. So I put a little blurb each week about what their students have learned, so that this way they can also work with their child at home on different social skills. Again, we created the website. We use Google Meets to meet with students that are fully remote. When I was quarantined, I used Google Meets to still meet with my kids that were in school or were remote. I had a student that was home quarantined, so she was able to join the group through Google Meet. So it's really great that they really have not had to skip a beat if there's any sort of interruption in their learning. Arrow. Click where? Why is this? Well, listen, we're not perfect with our technology skills, but we have come a long way. So we may not know how to click through a PowerPoint, but we do know how to use Google Classroom and Google Meet. So lastly, we have been able to continue with our, like I mentioned, our social skills groups. We just are really excited because we have been able to get additional digital resources that we work together on to put together. So again, to provide those services and resources to families and children remotely. And of course, our IEPs and 504 meetings have now all moved to Google Meets as well. I think they're all running smoothly. There has not been any major issues with that, so that we're still able to meet and discuss the child's needs and continue with their program. And I did just mention this. We've been spending more time working together as a team, which I love. We work collaboratively on putting our resources together. And that is the elementary school. Are there any questions?
I'm going to kind of ask this at each building if it turns out that way, but so I understand that COVID related, that you continue with the work that you were doing, or with students who seem to have more anxiety or more issues, but do you get the sense that everybody is struggling, and some of them don't necessarily, especially the young ones, know how to verbalize that? And so I think, Sue, you said you were going into classrooms, so you're talking to all the students about...
Not necessarily all the students about COVID-related issues, but I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, in addition to when a student talks to the teacher or talks to the parent about concerns, at the elementary level, you're looking out for things like behavioral changes, or kids that are having tantrums on a day-to-day basis, or who are just, having difficulty socializing that may not, knowing kids from year to year, it may not be typical of that child. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things, like I said, especially at the younger age, is to kind of look at all different ways that a child will express that they're dealing with stress.
Right. Well, I know that character education, the kind of things like, school books, so then you can talk about it, like, because some kids act out, some kids withdraw. I mean, you've seen it all, but I just worry that there's a level of nervousness or anxiety, whatever you want to call it, with adults as well as with students, and for students to know that it's okay to be worried, or it's okay to be afraid, or it's okay to be concerned, or whatever, that it's not something unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we can't identify every single kid that's struggling, and I will say a lot of the kids that I do talk to are very happy to be in school, even with the mask on, even away from their friends. I have not, and I see a lot of kids each week, and not one of them has said, I can't believe I'm in school and this is miserable. They are happy. They are excited to be here. I tell them how lucky they are that they have in-school learning 5 days a week, because many of the school districts, as we know, are not able to do that. So I think the children that have been lucky enough to come in person are happy to be here. That doesn't mean that they're not struggling. It doesn't mean that they have anxieties and worries and fears like many adults. But I think we do a really good job of letting them know that we are here to support them. And I think we're a very warm and welcoming environment. I mean, the three of us, and we were able to have Kayla there at the beginning of the year. I think that the kids know that they're loved and supported by their teachers as well as us. So we're gonna continue to support them in any way that we possibly can. And
I do also have to say, I was actually very impressed with, the way the students transitioned back into school. So yes, there were certain children that had difficulty coming back to school, and there were some worries, there were some worried parents. But I have to say, as a whole, I was quite impressed with, how smoothly kids did kind of move back into their routines. Good. Because I think, as we all know, children just strive on routines. So, that was nice to see.
Okay. And related to Barbara's question, Laura, I'm assuming the second step curriculum, you can sort of hand tailor what lessons you do. So you can do lessons related to some of these concerns and topics.
Yes. So each book, each curriculum is per grade level. So, the kindergartners, their lessons are different than a fourth grader. So, like, there are puppets that go along with the kindergarten and first grade curriculum. And I already went through and picked out which lessons that I would provide to each grade level based on what I taught them last year, what I think that they need to know this year. For example, fourth grade, I'm going to review some of the emotion management and coping skills with them, just because of the times. And then I'm going to spend much of the time on problem solving, because I know that they're going to middle school, and having spent time there, I know that they need some of those problem solving skills so that they're ready for middle school. Whereas a kindergartner, I might spend time more on, how do we make a friend and how do we transition to school. So it is new to me. I'm learning. I'm finding that the kids do like the second step program. And probably the biggest benefit for me and the kids is that I'm in every single class. So by the end of, November last year, I knew every single student in the whole building. So when I walked down the hall, I was like, hey, I'm like a movie star. They all know me. And it's nice because if they do struggle, I'm not like I'm not like a stranger to them. I'm like, remember me? I'm in your class. Oh yeah, so I think that's probably one of the best aspects. So they're all getting like tier 1 social emotional learning services, and then the individual and the groups are like our tier 2 and 3 services for those students. So they already have that connection with me as the counselor going into all of the classes. So I think that that's probably one of the best part, because, and if I have to call their parents, I tell them like, hey, they see me, they know me, I'm in their class. I'm the woman that comes in with Puppy and Snail, or, or I'm teaching them about, breathing techniques or some sort of calming strategies. So,
Okay, great. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
So next up is a one-woman show. Here tonight is Miss Coleman from the middle school. She's a school counselor.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm grateful to be here. I am Kendall Coleman. I'm the school counselor at the middle school. Leanne Bale is our social worker, and Jason Kane is our school psychologist. So just to lay out what I'm going to be presenting, the first 2 slides will be things we do collaboratively as well as independently in our jobs, and then the last 2 will be with considerations of hybrid and remote learning. So just some things and to highlight what we do. We always oversee special education students, case manage, 504 plans, as well as general education students. Individual counseling, we do with students who need it mandated, as well as any students we see or teachers see throughout the year that need that one-on-one support. We are crisis team members within the building, as well as district and regional crisis team. There's crisis counseling and intervention provided as needed, behavioral interventions. We are RTI members. Twice a month we have RTI meetings with each grade level, so we go through different students that might be struggling academically, behaviorally, emotionally, make assessments, interventions, and make choices of what we can do to support our students moving forward. We often collaborate with teachers, administrators, families, community agencies regarding a multitude of student needs. Connect with families, outside agencies, to outside agencies and providers, outside therapists, PINs, prevention program, social services, hospitals. District-wide coordination of holiday helpers, which allows us to help families in need during the holiday season. Chairing CSE, 504 annual reviews, IEP amendments. We also support staff members, whatever they need, they find in their classroom that they need consultation on students, then we are there for them. Conduct psychological evaluations for CSE, initial referrals and reevals. Transition meetings at the end of the year, we work with the 4th grade and elementary school teachers and administrators to transition our students well into the 5th grade year, so we know a little bit about them and placement. We also do the same with the high school when we are sending our 8th graders over to 9th grade to make sure their transition is well and they know the wonderful kids that we're sending over to them. We facilitate family and school meetings, coordinate building activities and school-wide initiatives. The end of October was Red Ribbon Week, so we did some activities with the students, obviously social distancing, so I went into the lunchroom and I was able to talk to the students about a youth pledge that they signed, which was them saying they're drug-free. They also were able to, thanks to the PTA, watch a virtual assembly. Since we can't be in the PAC, we had this assembly blasted onto their computers, and they were able to watch it about being an upstander and bullying. So all of those were talked about during that week. We also do No Name Calling Week and other school-wide initiatives. Some things that I do as the school counselor, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade individual guidance annual reviews. So that is separate of the annual reviews that Mr. Kane may do. The state has mandated that the school counselor meets with every single 6th, 7th, and 8th grader for these meetings where we go over goals academically, emotionally, socially. We talk about career and college interests. They talk to me about their struggles academically, and we go over steps that they could take to do better or to help them with those struggles. We also often go through Power School, and they show me where they're struggling in their grades, and we go through any missing work, or they just let me know any random facts about them. Like often they say, "Oh, Mr. Colvin's your dad, the Saints are awful." So that is something I get from most of the 5th and 6th graders, but it's fine. I also do master scheduling as well as course selection. Clinical Corner is something we do monthly. There are newsletters that are sent out. Our November one was just sent out, I believe, last week. It's about 12 steps for raising confident kids, so that's sent out to the community. We do weekly social skills groups, which is similar to the elementary school, and our counseling groups that are mandated, as well as 5th grade lunch bunch, which is a transitional group. So when the 5th graders come over, they get to know me. We have lunch together. Right now it is a small group, so usually we meet like 6 to 8 students each day, but now I'm trying to take the students outside if I have those groups, or I have about 3 to 4 students in the groups, and we play games, get to know one another. It's really fun. And then we have new student groups as well, which we have a number of new students come in, so we focus on that with any new students. If they find any friends, we have groups, lunch groups, groups during their study hall periods, so they get to meet new people. We also had an implementation of a school-wide SEL curriculum. We have second step as well at the middle school, so 5th through 8th graders get SEL at our school. I do a quarterly push into every single class to deliver these lessons. We also do the learning skills, empathy, emotion management, and problem-solving skills based on the needs assessment that I did for quarter 2. I found that teachers, parents, and students felt that they were lacking in executive functioning skills and those study strategies. I mean, for them being home, it's difficult, and they've never been asked to have that structure and to be sitting at a laptop and to make sure that they are doing that work. So I will be pushing into every classroom for quarter 2 to go over study strategies, implement some executive functioning skills organization, so they feel better prepared moving forward for that hybrid remote learning section that we have to do at the middle school, that students are only in 2 days a week or not at all. So that's very important for them. Hybrid and remote considerations. We created a district-wide family resource website that provides information and resources to students and families. We have also used a lot of technology. Google Classroom is really so wonderful. We do Google Meets over the phone. We deliver our services for weekly individual counseling, group counseling, family meetings, crisis interventions, team meetings, as well as connecting with community resources. We found that we have a variety of learners at the middle school. So we have students who are completely remote and love it and are rock stars. And then we have students who need to be remote based on their family's careers or their own immune health. And then we have students who are in school and are grateful. I mean, most of the students who are in school are grateful to be there. But we do have students who are home and want to be in school, but based on what they need, they have to be home. So we've found that, I am implementing a lot of Google Meets where I'm bringing students in that are home, and then I ask them, who are some of your friends? And I'll bring those 2 friends down, I'll put the student who's home on the laptop, and then we'll be able to have lunch together. So it's just a way to have that social connection when they feel like they're isolated at home, and that's very important. So using that technology has been amazing to connecting students who have to be home and want that social interaction. The other thing is smaller in-person groups. Since we have to follow CDC guidelines, we do have smaller number of students in our groups, which means we have to have a larger number of groups. So either we go outside with these groups, we spread them out. We actually got rid of our huge table in our office and just put little desks around so that we can make everyone feel comfortable about being in our offices. We have individual in-person counseling groups that are also following CDC guidelines. Mr. Kane has a group that he pushes into a classroom to deliver his group counseling. So he does some fun cahoots with them. It's really awesome. We do monitoring of students' attendance and engagement. It's a little more difficult now that they are online sometimes. We have to really monitor when they're there and when they're not there and engaged to make sure we're staying on top of everyone and making sure everyone is there. Psychologist conducts educational portion of the CSE revaluation testing. Mr. Kane is doing the educational portion of the testing for the middle school so that teachers can spend as much time into their classrooms with their students, which we thought was really important. We didn't want teachers to have to be taken out of their classroom to do testing, so Mr. Kane has taken on all of those testing. We also have individual counseling and family consultation surrounding the COVID issues. There are transitional issues and anxieties and worries and concerns around COVID that we've been addressing, which is new for us too. So we have been working as a team to collaborate and understand our own worries and stresses and then be able to help our students manage those stresses, get some coping skills, as well as the academic changes and the expectations and the flexibility that is happening at our school, and mask wearing, which is going really well actually at our school, and I'm very proud of our students for really just wearing their masks, being safe, and conscientious all the time. And we developed and shared information about SEL in the classroom with our staff members. A lot of staff expressed that they wanted to incorporate some aspects of social emotional learning into their classroom. So we were able to create quick tips for them to be able to implement that, just to know that they can create a sense of belonging in the classroom so it is a safe space. They promote resilience and then respond positively. And if there are any questions about how to respond to the student if something is brought up, they know that they can come to us to consult, or we can always meet with the student as well. And I think that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Any questions?
Now, if you saw me frantically taking notes, I am a clinician in a middle school.
Oh.
I'm borrowing many an idea.
Oh, I'm so
And we
glad
do,
to hear that.
obviously, a lot of it is we all do.
Yeah.
But I love the clinical corner.
Oh,
There's
great.
a couple of things I really like, so.
Yes.
Thank you very much for
Of
sharing.
course, of course.
And you may probably, maybe, not the person to ask, but I see Travis is there. So the middle school used to sponsor Safe Kids that went over to the elementary school. Probably you guys did it when you were in the elementary school. It was a K through 4 program to teach kids the rules of being safe at the appropriate age levels. It was great for the middle school students to come over. The elementary school kids loved them, and I don't know whether the middle school kids loved it, but they certainly seemed to have a good time. This is not the year that we can do that kind of thing, but I just want to keep in our minds that program or something similar to that, just because I think it was a powerful bridge. And it was something that, the songs were kind of dorky, or whatever, but the kids remembered it because there were, to them, older kids teaching them to sing these songs and encouraging them and teaching them about being safe. So I just don't want to lose that. And that was a great middle school gift to the elementary school, and I know not this year, but.
So I can speak a little bit to that. Mr. McCarty and myself were actually involved with participation had certainly dwindled in that program over the years, and it was actually in the midst of a redesign pre-COVID. So there were plans underway to sort of revamp that program to increase student engagement and interest, to get a more engaged group of students willing to come to the elementary school. And I know Mr. McCarty and I shared some ideas for how we can make that happen. So certainly you have our promise that when we can have students traveling between buildings again, that'll certainly be something that will continue with, again, in some revised fashion to make sure we have the student interest.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Kendall.
Thank you, Kendall.
So now we're going to bring up the high school student support clinical team. First up is Miss Fry, sorry. I'll be calling you Noda forever, Miss Fry. So she is our school psychologist. After that, Miss Wayne is also here, and then our newest social worker, Kayla Morales.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the things we do together as a student support team. So we've kind of titled our suite upstairs student support because it's a psychologist and our new awesome social worker. And we felt that it's better to say, oh, please go to student support rather than go to the psychologist's office. You know, the kids often saw that as like a bad thing. So we've kind of called ourselves student support in order to help them feel a little bit more comfortable. So I'm going to start and talk about the things that we do together as a team and how we've had to change, add things due to the COVID pandemic. So first of all, we always had individual websites for students and families that has community resources, and of course we updated things to have tips to support COVID, and it's all on the Putnam Valley High School website. One challenge that we had back in March, April, May, was that students don't always check their emails. So it's hard to communicate with them, especially if we need to see them for counseling or just to get resources out to them. So we started a new student support Instagram page. So you can follow us at PVHS Student Support. But basically we have been posting, you know, there's like positive messages, resources, just kind of ways, to, like tips, coping skills, different things that the students can reach out and understand, maybe use to help themselves. And of course, that's their world, social media, so we thought that would be a good idea to reach out to them. We also have some Twitter pages that we post resources to. This year, we created a student of concern referral form for teachers because, you know, often they notice something or they hear something or they read something, or then they think that the student needs to maybe see a clinician. So because we don't want them out of class, we created this form that they fill out and we get it, and then we kind of forward it to the appropriate clinician, and we'll reach out to them whether they're in person or virtual through Google Meet. We also created virtual appointment slots with the help of the wonderful Mr. Mahoney. We have a link to each of our calendars on the grade level Google Classrooms. So if students are home and they want to sign up for a virtual slot, they can. The idea is to keep them in class as much as they can. You know, they're only here 2 days a week. They only see their teachers once a week, really. So we really wanted to maximize their in-person learning and provide the supports while they're at home, you know, during that hour lunch when they're probably taking a nap. And that 1:45 to 2:30 has been ideal because a lot of teachers are free, a lot of the kids are free. If they're home, they could quickly jump on a Google Meet. So we've tried to provide supports through that for them. Then over the summer, Dr. Cherry created a high school SEL team. So we've done a lot of work, the clinicians as well as the teachers, on SEL, especially related to COVID. So what we did was we created a COVID SEL questionnaire. And it was really just to kind of check in, see how things are doing, how the students were feeling about coming back to school this year. We had about 400 kids fill out the questionnaire, which we thought was pretty great.
That's great.
Yeah.
It was posted to the Google Classrooms. And some of the questions were, you know, were you personally affected by COVID? Did you lose someone to COVID? How comfortable are you with hybrid learning? How comfortable are you with remote?
how confident are you feeling doing this type of learning? When you were home, how did you cope? And then we kind of went into a whole part on like what coping skills do you use, so we can kind of assess the things that we need to continue to work on. So we've kind of just pulled the names of the students that we're like, like maybe we should keep an eye out on. And if they come up at 3-week monitoring, or if they come at our RTI, we kind of have an idea of, okay, maybe it's because they lost someone to COVID, or, oh, maybe because they really struggled being home alone for 3 months. You know, we're working on like a wellness week, so we're going to kind of teach more social, not necessarily social skills, but like more coping skills, more at like the broader level, just with regards to how can we support them doing this on their own. We also created something for the teachers. You know, I know the push from the state, and especially with our administration, was SEL, SEL, SEL. It's so important that we make the students feel comfortable. We make sure that they feel heard. Yes, learning is also still important, but your emotions are huge right now. So the team was made up of Dr. Entreri, some clinicians, as well as teachers, and what we did was we used the CASEL SEL practices for within the classroom. So that's like the welcoming rituals, the engaging pedagogy, and the optimistic closure. So we came up with this document that kind of has little tips, little activities that teachers can do to start a lesson. Do a little check-in, like using an emoji on your Google Meet chat. Then some activities that they can kind of embed into the curriculum in the lesson. Then we also did some ways to close, like how do you wrap up, how do you reflect? So we just provided some different options for teachers within that document. Also, we have more like thorough lessons and videos that, you know, if the teacher ever wanted, we could give to them. So some have reached out to us, but we didn't want to overwhelm teachers with even more things. So we felt like embedding things into the curriculum is a little better. And then other things we just do all together in general, collaborate with administrators, counselors, teachers. We attend all 3-week monitoring meetings, RTI meetings. We assist administrators if there are student issues that are needed, crisis intervention. I will say risk assessments still are happening, and that is a challenge, I'll be honest. You know, just if the student is at home on that day, if the student is a virtual learner, how do you comfortably assess a student, and how do you do it in a sensitive manner and make sure that you're really addressing it? So that has been a challenge. Luckily, it hasn't happened very often, but sometimes we'll get an English teacher who says, oh, so-and-so wrote this, and they're not in the building. So we have to really make sure that we are taking care of them, referring out if we need to, and addressing the situation. And other than that, just in general, we continue to connect and collaborate with outside agencies, therapists, community services such as CCSI, Cove Care, supporting students and supporting families. Okay. Mrs. Wayne is next.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Eva.
Hi there. I'm Eva Wayne. I'm one of the high school psychologists. I don't want to regurgitate all the stuff that the psychologists have just told you that we do, because we do that, and I do that, and Gina does it. But again, we do the mandated reevaluations and the initial testing for high school students. We also do some testing for out-of-district students. Right now, during the COVID time, we're trying to make arrangements for them to come to our building so that we can test them. Testing in general is a whole different animal these days because, you know, the mask, the other thing, the plastic between us. Normally you love to build that rapport, especially when you're testing, because you want to get the best out of the student. Luckily, when they're high school students, we've already known them for 3 years, so that rapport has been able to be established for the most part. The freshmen, this is a challenge because they're getting to know their teachers for the first time online. They're getting to know us, basically not in real life and not being able to sit close to us in the office, so it's a little bit more difficult. So that's a challenge. The amount of time that we're testing right now is a little bit greater because, like one of the other psychologists said, we are now doing the educational testing to assist the special ed teachers, to free them up, to spend more time on their lesson planning because they're doing everything remote. So we are now doing the cognitive and the educational, and I have to tell you, it's about 5 hours worth of testing. Mm-hmm. So we have to make a decision sometimes. Do we do it all at once and get it over with and just take the kid away from the class for the whole day, or do we split it up and make them come in 3 times? We have to talk to the parent. We have to deal with transportation. It's a little bit, it's a lot to do. We write the report. Clearly, we write reports all the time. We do mandated counseling. You've heard that before. The counseling could be sometimes twice a week. It could be once a week. It could be once a month. For the most part, I would say my particular students have now mostly gone remote. And you might ask, how is that going? And I'm going to say that for some, it's actually very good. They're talking more than ever because I'm not looking at their face. Sometimes they put up a little emoji or whatever they want to put up, and I can't see them. I say, can I just see your eyes for 5 minutes, and then you can put that little figure back on. But they are talking more, so I think the anxiety might be actually lessened by the screen. For others, I miss the closeness. Others that I have a relationship with, they used to come into the office, and we would come on a regular basis. It was wonderful, and I'm missing that, and I really hope to God that sooner or later we get back to being able to have that closeness with our students. But the remote counseling isn't bad for everyone. That's what I'm going to say. Getting them online, however, has been a challenge, because if you make an appointment at 10 o'clock and you call, and maybe I call the parent and say, I have an appointment. Well, guess what? They might still be sleeping. So it's more difficult to get them to commit to some kind of appointment that you make. So I've learned now to make them later in the day or after lunch or during lunch, and that seems to work out a little better. We do use the Google Classroom, like Gina said. Sometimes it's if I need a student, maybe if there's a little homework, give me 5 things that are good about yourself and 5 things that you need to work on, kind of thing. What I am finding is that right now, I just want students to stay positive, and I want them to be resilient. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm the queen of Plan B, because I tell all high schoolers, Plan A may never work out, and you better have a Plan B. So that is my focus sometimes, to make sure that they have something else to go to, something else that they feel good about. And I think if I could say something that's different about high school versus like everything else that you've heard, we are it. Like, this is the end of the line. So we take a big responsibility to make them feel good about themselves, make sure that they find their passion, any passion, so that when they leave us, they have a direction to follow. Because the saddest students are the ones that don't know what they like, or they don't know where they're going, and they have no supportive people in their life to say, you're really good at this, why don't you try that? So we spend a lot of time and a lot of talking about transitioning and to find out what do they want to do, and then running around trying to find, I'm sure guidance, trying to find the right colleges, the right technical programs. Maybe I'm hearing a lot of armed services these days. People want to do that. So it's just really to explore a lot of different things without judgment, and just making sure that this is what the kid wants to do. And sometimes in high school, it's also having heartfelt conversations with parents to say, I know you want your kid to go here, but they don't want that. They want something else. Let's try to meet halfway and make that happen for them. How do you go to the next one? Just hit it. Okay, so we do chair CSE meetings, of course. We also coordinate them and get all the invites and look very closely at their schedules to make sure that the right teachers are attending, so that they could have something to say that's valuable in terms of the students' future plan. We do program reviews. We do initial evaluations. We do transfer reviews for those students coming into the district. The reevaluation meetings happen every 3 years for every special education student, so that's a full testing. We assist with the IEP development, which means the social emotional information is left to us to fill in social goals, cognitive abilities, the evaluations, the numbers, the reports, the scores, et cetera. We put that into the IEP. We will address IEP amendments. Those happen if we feel like a student needs more support than it's currently being offered, and we might have to have a meeting and say the student needs just like one more thing to be on here, or a different kind of program in order to be successful. So we run that. We also are the gatekeepers for the 504 kids, for the most part. I'm finding that a lot now. Every student that's not doing well, they got a 504. What else can we give them? So there's a lot of conversation to do with 504s, and are we giving them everything that they need, or are we making them as independent as they should be because they're leaving us very shortly? Do they have too many things on there? So those are 2 types of conversations. We chair those meetings as well. They're coming up we're actually changing, we kind of changed things around not to be so bombarded in the spring. 504s will start to happen soon. The CSE meetings will happen in the springtime. We do also collaborate with the PINS program, Persons in Need of Supervision. Our principal is at the forefront of that and may get that going, but sometimes the therapists, the counselors will call up and ask for a little bit of history, find out what's been done with that student, why did they need a PINS, or just to get updates, and we get involved in that. And something that I don't like to be involved in, which is the CPS cases, but we do. You know, Gina, what that's all about. So that's a much more difficult thing, but we do sit with the students when they're being interviewed because we don't want them in the room being interviewed by themselves. So we get involved with that as well. Any questions? No? Okay.
I just want to add a potential resource for both psychologists. I know in our district, the director of technology gets an alert every time a student logs into a website that has anything to do with self-harm, violence. If you Googled the question, ways to kill myself, God forbid, but it's happened, and then that alert goes to the principal, and then that's where a lot of our risk is. We haven't, thank God, had as many of the regular risk assessments, but we've been doing one of those at least once a week.
You know, I actually found a quote that to me is very important because, I mean, the nuts and bolts of what we do is, you know, the IQ testing, right? Everybody wants to know what their IQ is in the cognitive testing. So there's a quote that goes, "Success is not final and failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue." And I think that's what our high school people are trying to teach, because you can have an IQ of 140, and that doesn't mean that you're going to have the best life. And you can have a low IQ, and that doesn't mean that you're not going to achieve your dreams. But you just have to stay positive and keep following something. Right. So I think that's important.
So before you go, or,
yes,
or it can be any one of you, again, I'm thinking about every once in a while, you know, I have friends who have kids in high school and whatever, and they seem to be still, they're definitely glad to be back to at least 2 days in person, to have that structure back. I mean, they may fight against it and say it's terrible, but they really are glad. But I hear them, they're not sure. Am I depressed? Am I sad? Am I bored? Am I, like, I don't know what I am. And I don't know if what I'm feeling is normal.
Well, we do try to normalize that because they are bored. I can tell you that, because they're limited. They're not out with their, you know, doing what teenagers normally do in their groups and their parties and all of that.
But my question is, are you only reaching out to students that you know have problems, or is there a way of reaching all students with some of these positive messages that, you know, you're okay, everybody's feeling like that, whatever?
Yeah, Kelly does that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
you get to Kelly yet.
Let's do the rest.
I think that too, with the social media piece, I think that was like the goal of that, because they do go on social media, and that's kind of the reaching out. Like,
so your Instagram is not just to students that you're seeing in a
can follow us.
It goes to okay.
And we have the websites, we have certain things, like we have resources. You'll see there's bulletin boards all over the school, so Kayla will talk about all that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kayla Morales. I'm the new school social worker at the high school, and I'm there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So I've been doing the social emotional push-ins into the academic studies. Last year, I was going into the 9th and 10th grade classes. This year, unfortunately, due to the hybrid schedule, the smaller classes, and my schedule, I am focusing on the 9th grade, which we think right now is really important, especially with them transitioning in, not really getting to finish out their 8th grade year. So I've really been focusing on the 9th grade. So the first activity that I did with them when we started was writing a letter to your future self. So I had them sit down and really think about kind of where they are right now, being in 9th grade, unfortunately with this pandemic, having to wear a mask, who they're friends with, what they like to do, and then goals that they have for themselves while they're in high school. So whether it's academic goals, whether it's, unfortunately, it's hard right now, but if they want to be on a sports team, do they want to be a part of a club or get more involved? Do they want to be in the school play? Things like that. And they wrote this letter to themselves that I collected, and I'm going to hand back to them their senior year. So it's something that hopefully they kind of forget about, and then when they get their senior year, they can see what they were able to achieve or what they hopefully have enough time to still work on. And then off of that, the next activity that we're in the middle of working on is creating this visualization of kind of what their goals are. And they created this Google slide, and they're putting down like inspirational quotes and pictures of the goals that they have for themselves. So it's called a vision board. So obviously when I was younger, I'd go into magazines and cut things out and create these vision boards, but now with technology, it's all digital. So it's a great way for them to create this visual that they can then continue to work on and change. So again, they're putting different pictures and quotes and things that they can put down on paper that can help them reach their goals. So that's really what we've been working on right now with those SEL push-ins. On top of doing those push-ins, I'm also doing check-ins with just general ed students. So whether there's a student that is struggling and they self-refer that they have something going on, whether it was when they were at home they were struggling, or there's something going on in school with friends, family, etc., or if a teacher notices that maybe they're not doing work if they're fully remote, or just something has changed. So I'm following up with those students. And then I'm also doing the SEL bulletin board. So there's bulletin boards around the school that have different inspirational quotes and different things up that all the students in the building get to see that will hopefully help them kind of push through their days. On top of that, similar to what the psychologists do, I'm doing mandated counseling. Like we said, they're mostly virtual because we don't want to pull those students out of their classes. We're utilizing the Google Classroom. One thing that I did this year, and I'm going to attempt to click on it and see if it works, but I created a virtual office as additional support for students. So this is something that a lot of clinicians started doing once schools were going remote. But it's a Google slide, and it's just an interactive office that students can go to. I have it kind of posted in their Google Classrooms, and they can click on different pictures, and it'll bring up different links to help them, whether it's like a mindfulness activity or like a mandala, something to do to kind of relax themselves. And they can just click on that, and it's like a little emoji of myself, and then they have this office that they can kind of look at. And then what Gina had mentioned, we're hoping to do a wellness week, and I'm in the process of creating a virtual like mindfulness room. So it's very similar, but something we can send out to students. And it's just a interactive room where they can click on different things to hopefully get additional support with that. The other counseling that I'm doing is actually referrals made for substance abuse issues. So mostly either getting caught vaping or with a vape, I'm meeting with those students and really talking about kind of their nicotine use and hopefully ways that they can cut back on their use to eventually stop. One thing that I started working on as well, we know that SEL is so important for students, but it is equally as important for our faculty and staff. So last year, I created the School Social Worker Spotlight, and it was originally created as like a monthly newsletter to teachers to kind of help them depending on the month. So for example, around midterm time last year, I did a test anxiety newsletter, and it was just to kind of help teachers see the signs of test anxiety and ways that they can help the students through it if they were struggling. As the school year went on and then COVID hit and we all went remote, I kind of switched up that spotlight to really focus on the teachers. So I started sending out monthly, and then this year it actually turned into weekly spotlights, but it is focusing on staff well-being. So it's a lot of like different mindfulness activities, a lot of focusing on reminding staff and students. I said it was okay if they wanted to share it with students, but really for faculty to make sure that they unplug and disconnect when they can. So we know we're constantly on the computer for the students, whether they're remote or hybrid, to just make sure that if you have a weekend where you don't have work to do, to just turn everything off. Because when we're not doing work, we're on our cell phones, or we're on something, because we always need to be connected in some sort of way to technology. So just disconnect from everything. And unfortunately, the weather hasn't been great the past couple of days, but just trying to enjoy the nice weather while it's here, because we know winter's coming and we're going to be stuck inside the house again. So just ways that they can kind of disconnect. I'm not even going to attempt to click on it right now because I don't think it's going to come up. So the other thing that I do, obviously, is collaborate with the school psychologists, the guidance counselors, and teachers to support students in their social emotional needs however I can, depending on the parent doing any type of counseling and training sessions. And then what's really important, especially for the school social worker, but connecting families to community resources. So I found that it was really important. We have so many great resources in Putnam County. So it was really important for me to kind of outreach a lot of them and just get to know therapists in the area and the different resources, so that when a family came to me and said that they were in need, I kind of know where I can send them. So I do a lot of work around that. And then I help create the family resource page for our district website, which, again, I click on, but now that's not even coming up. But that can be found on the main page of our district website. And we created that at the end of last year, once we were remote, because we realized that families needed to have those resources at their fingertips, whether it was to find mental health resources or the food pantry, whatever the case may be. So we were constantly updating that website, so it had, the most recent flyers and different things that were happening in the area, so parents were able to get whatever support that they needed. And then lastly, I created a PV caring closet. So last year I was talking to a parent who was having some financial struggles, and while talking to her, she mentioned that she is having difficulty getting clothes for her kids because they're growing so quickly. So obviously we know with our students, they're constantly growing and outgrowing all of their clothes, and this parent just wasn't able to kind of keep up with it. So I thought about it, and I decided that I wanted to create this caring closet. So I contacted the faculty and staff at the high school and asked them if they were willing to donate any lightly used clothes, jackets, shoes, whatever it was, so I can stock this closet that the custodians were able to find me a nice cabinet on wheels. And I now have a fully stocked cabinet whenever we feel that there's a student in need. So for example, we actually got to use the closet this year. We did have a family that had a house fire, and unfortunately, our student had lost a lot of his belongings in his bedroom, and I was able to put together a care package of clothes, reach out to the teachers to see if they had any clothes that will specifically fit him, and the family was thrilled and was so appreciative that we were able to do that. So right now I have a fully stocked closet, a variety of sizes, because our faculty and staff have children of all ages. So I did send an email out also to the clinicians at the elementary school and the middle school that if they have students that are in need, now we're able to hopefully help them as well. And now Dr. Doherty for guidance counselors.
I have a quick question. You mentioned vaping. What are you doing proactively for anti-alcohol and drug awareness or education?
So right now, I know that we've had some presentations in the past, but it's really me just reaching out to the students that are getting caught vaping. We don't have anything specifically in place right now besides some bulletin boards depending on the month. I know that, when I'm talking to students, we'll kind of dive deeper into that, but we haven't done anything school-wide this year.
Do we feel like substance abuse problems are more serious during COVID, less serious, or pretty much the same?
So I have to say, we haven't really had many cases of students that have been caught vaping or have had a vape. So right now, I'm not seeing it as a huge issue. I know obviously some students are using it as coping skills, so it's really talking to them about healthier coping skills, and I think that that's kind of where we, our larger SEL and kind of putting different ways to cope with all stress and anxiety, kind of target that as well, that there are just better ways to cope than drugs and alcohol. But I don't think we're seeing more now that COVID has hit.
Sandy?
You guys got to come up. Sorry. You could talk, we got to come up to the mic. Sorry. I like that you raised your hand, though. That was very studious of you.
Good evening, everyone. Just to follow up on your question, we do have the student organization club, Students Against Destructive Decisions, and they do a lot of work with the alcohol prevention and such. Also in our health curriculum with Mr. Worrell, they do a lot of those kinds of issues and how to make better decisions in that way. And then I was also going to say, as far as the vaping, we've seen a dramatic reduction in vaping this year. Now, we did have the BOCES safety and health coordinator, Mr. Guglieri, come last year and do a presentation for our students that was fairly graphic. So, just a lot of talking about it and a lot of information about it may have been, and in the news, may have helped to reduce it, but also some students, we do have over 100 students who are all remote, so some of that could be because they're home, and also it was a very social activity for students, especially boys, and so if your friends are all home and you're in school by yourself, there's less of an attraction to do that. So a dramatic reduction this year.
Now, and you're going to do the questionnaire this year, right? The survey,
Yeah, they've already started that.
Okay.
In 10th grade, I believe it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
The communities that care.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to quickly do a run through of the guidance counselor's role. Really, a lot of the guidance counselor role in general is engaging students who are struggling, making sure that they're meeting with many, many different students, whether that is to discuss struggles that they're having, whether academically or social emotionally. But a lot of the work, besides doing their everyday guidance counseling, college preparing, vocational preparedness, work with students, they're really working with a lot of families on, okay, so what's the plan now? And it's really difficult for families and for children, making decisions at this time about where you're applying, what's going to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty. So they're really doing a tremendous amount of work, not just with our students, but with their families, on making choices and how to apply to colleges and why, or trade schools, or the military, really making decisions about what works for them and their family, especially during these times. Does anybody have any questions? So I just really want to say that our clinical team, I've worked with them for many years now, and they're a strong clinical team, and we have good working relationships, and they're constantly in communication with each other across the buildings. One of the nice things about some of the changes we've made, sort of to Ms. Parmley's point before, is about that sort of language and the connections between buildings. With Second Step and with the program that we're using at the high school, a lot of the language is the same. They take you through sort of a very similar language, very similar experiences, so you become familiar and know where to go and know who to access, how to access things. So I'm just incredibly proud to work with our clinical staff. There isn't a day or time when I reach out to them, whether it's 10 o'clock at night, we have a student in crisis, or, Miss Fry calling me at 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday when I'm out on a run saying, hey, we have a kid in crisis. What should we do and how do we address this? They are available all the time. They are constantly working with families and our students. So I just feel really privileged and lucky to have them. So thank you all for coming out tonight and for doing everything.
So I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of our presenters this evening. For those who don't know, I have the luxury of being married to an elementary school social worker, so I am well aware of all the vital role that our clinical staff providers provide for our students and for our staff as well. And so much of what you do, for as important as it is, happens behind the scenes and behind closed doors, and probably don't often receive the recognition that you guys should. So I just wanted to, again, thank you all for taking your time to put these together and coming here this evening to present. And obviously, thank you for supporting our students every day.
And I'm just going to follow up on the guidance counselors. They were sorry they couldn't be here tonight, but I can't express enough also what an amazing job they did in the spring with being home all remote. Because our counseling staff, unlike other guidance counselors in other schools, they meet with every student individually to come up with their academic plan. So that meant they by phone at home called every student to plan their schedule for the following year. And as you know, with high school students, they like to sleep in. So they really adjusted their schedules so that at 9 o'clock at night, they were calling students and families to if there were any issues or problems or a student was failing, and really went above and beyond to make sure that we were up and running in September. And I can't explain how important that was, because without a master schedule, we would be nowhere. So I give them tons of credit for that, and they've been a huge help, really helping families during this time.
Thanks.
I feel like I can't add my words because I'd feel like I'd be saying
I know one thing I forgot. Mrs. Keller in the guidance office. That's what I wanted to say. She has been such a fantastic addition. She has the guidance counselors transitioning to new technologies. She's changed their appointment books. She's got them online. She's got everything organized. So I wanted to make sure I threw that in there.
I was just going to say, I think the clinicians in the school are the most important individual in the entire school. I can say that as a school clinician, but I really do think our job is to get the students ready to be students. It's that base Maslow need. So you've identified that really well in the presentation. It was very thorough, very thoughtful. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nice job.
Have a good evening.
You'll all be back pretty soon.
Yeah.
So I believe Ms. Parmalee is going to do our last presentation, talking about NYSSBA.
I'd like Joe and Jeanette to say what they thought. The NYSSBA convention this year was all virtual, which allowed me to take more classes or attend more seminars than I normally could. I'm still watching things that I didn't get a chance to see. So that was a really good thing. At the annual business meeting, which was the Saturday at the end, it was good. All the things that we talked about, the issues that we raised, were adopted. I will say that when we started, we needed to have a quorum of 200, and we had 219. And all through the process, they kept saying, please don't leave, please don't leave, please don't leave, because if you leave and we lose a quorum, we have to stop working on our legislative agenda. We got all the way down to the last thing, and we lost the quorum, so we couldn't finish, which to me is so frustrating. If you're going to do this, stay till the end.
Minutes.
It's only another 5 minutes. You've stayed all this time. But anyway, other than, I'm glad that Westchester Putnam had a significant number of people as part of the 200, so I'm glad for that. I think we have a really strong advocacy program, and I was really proud to sit in on the annual business meeting. So this was your first?
It was my first. I found it very informative. I haven't had time to go back and watch others that I wasn't able to. I still want to dedicate some time to do that.
I think
felt
until December 31st
Yeah,
or
I think it's
something,
great
yeah.
that it's, there
It's
are
a
a
long
lot of,
time.
because there's a lot of topics that I wanted to sit in on, but the time's conflicted. I almost felt like it was speed dating because it was just really quick going from one to another. But I think they did a great job, and I was able to sit on even where some kids presented. I don't know if you said it.
No, I haven't. That's the one I'm
Yeah.
waiting for. I will tell you that
Very
if I
informative.
were hiring any of these people to teach in Putnam Valley, they would not get the job because they presented for 40 minutes and talked
Yep.
at me. There was not, they didn't, one session asked me to participate, had us voting and putting our ideas in, but the rest of it was pretty much just talking at you, which can be really frustrating when you're sitting on an uncomfortable chair at your dining room table. Joe, what did you think?
Similarly, I do a ton of webinars, or attend a ton of webinars, and that would have been my biggest negative takeaway. Would just been, it was all lecture. Let me get, there's 3 speakers. They only have 20 minutes each maximum. They wanted to barrel through their stuff, but there's lots of content there that was really, refreshing to be, reiterated, that we kind of knew about in many ways. I did like the keynote, the doctors, the 3 doctors.
Those were they were great. Yeah.
I thought it was odd that one of them was in the car, but I'm assuming they're coming back from work. But that was very much a very interesting take on that. They say, when they cut school, it actually prepared them, and just very interesting things. I think also the newspaper that comes out from the school boards did a really good job of highlighting some of the highlights. The role of the superintendent, or with all the graphics, I thought that was well done. What the superintendent spends their time on, what they thought of the boards they work with, et cetera, et cetera. There are a ton that I need to go back to and watch, and I haven't. I hope they saved the school board, the musical, because I did not see that part of it.
It's hysterical. I'm thinking, I'm glad I'm not on that board. But it was good. I'm like, oh, good, we don't do that. We're good there. So, yeah, it was good. So, anyway, okay. We'll be in person next year, maybe. They kept asking us through the thing, like, would you do this next year? Do you like this better? I'm sure it saved them a ton of money.
Would it still be in New York next year? Don't they do a couple
Well,
years at a time?
it will if it's live, but if it's not live,
Right.
But I think they were. When I was reading the paper earlier today, I think it was half of the in-person attendance was online. It's like, I think it was only 1,000 people total that registered for online. But I guess the last conference was like 2,300 people that actually attended live. So it was odd. I thought you might get more, but I think there were some people who were upset that actually you were charging for it and it was virtual. It's like, well, you're still getting the content. Right. You're not getting a lot of the connection, but you had to make yourself part of the chats. You had to make yourself part of the networking. You had to, kind of go outside of, I'll just go in and grab lunch type of thing that you would do in one of the live sessions.
I don't know. I still like in person. So
Me too.
we want them back in school, and I want to be back to my NYSSBA conference in person. So, okay.
All right, that brings us to the superintendent's report, Dr. Luft.
Sure. So I just wanted to cover some of the communications that have gone out over the last couple of weeks. We sent a COVID update document out last week. And some of the highlights of that document included what was sent out as our survey for remote learners, the opportunity for them to opt back in following the holiday break. So the first day back would be January 4th. Subsequent email was sent out with the link to the survey. So that's out and live now. We're asking anyone who is a remote learner to please complete that survey prior to Thanksgiving. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving is when it's closed, and we will, of course, start contacting individuals who had not yet completed the survey before then. We spoke a little bit about weather-related school delays. In the event that we have a delayed start to the school day, we'll revert back to our typical dismissal time. It's just not advantageous for learning if we're going to have a delay and then essentially a 1 hour early dismissal in the same day. So that'll be true for all buildings in the event that we have a delayed start, 2 hour delay, 3 hour delay, that will revert back to our typical dismissal times. So we essentially recapture an hour within those school days. There's been a lot of conversations about social gatherings and parties. I know the governor just came out with new regulations. We're occasionally notified of parties after the fact. Anytime we're provided that information, we send it directly to the Sheriff's Department. We contact the Department of Health. It's certainly not part of our role to investigate, but in the case that if we are made aware and have documentation of gatherings where social distancing or masks aren't being worn, we would certainly act on those. We piloted after-school transportation for our fall sports season. It was not widely used, so in speaking with our transportation staff and Mr. Burrow, we've made the decision that this Friday will be the last day we'll run that 5:30 bus. Obviously, we're incurring an expense in paying overtime to run that bus. And in some cases, we had 0 people, sometimes 1, sometimes 3. So we thought we would spend some time and put effort into making sure that any student who stays after for what may or may not be winter sports, that we can make sure that they have a ride home. But it certainly doesn't make sense to run a large school bus with 1 student on it. And then there's been a lot of conversation about microclusters and travel restrictions. So I've shared the document several times that describe the metrics for what it would take to be determined to be considered a microcluster. In our region, it's a 3.5% 7-day positivity rate for 10 days. I know it doesn't seem like it makes any mathematical sense, but we have a 7-day rate, which is the average over the last 7 days. If that 7-day rate is over 3.5% and remains over 3.5% for 10 full days, and we have 15 cases per 100,000 people in Putnam County, it makes it pretty easy because we have almost exactly 100,000 people, so it's essentially 15 cases a day. That would identify us as one of those yellow cluster zones. The one nearest to us, obviously, is some in Rockland. Portchester was identified as yellow and quickly went to orange, which was more restrictive. So it's data that we're continuing to monitor. 2 weeks ago, we thought we were nowhere close. Maybe after New Year's, there was a possibility, depending upon what happened. Now we currently find ourselves, I think, 4 days in a row meeting the metric to be considered one of those zones. So we'll have to see what happens over the next 6 days. But if the numbers stay the way they are, it would warrant us being identified, us being the entire county, Putnam County, to be identified as one of those zones. What I wrote in my message is, if you're in the yellow zone, it's a requirement to test 20% of all in-person learners, students and staff, every week. And you can't test the same people over and over again. You have to do 20% 1 week, the next 20% the next week, essentially over 5 weeks testing all of your in-person students and staff. Now, it sounds great, and the state's even offered to send us some tests, kits, but it doesn't really address the real need, which is we're not a lab. We don't have certified people to administer tests, to report tests. So it's not feasible, at least at this time. I know neighboring districts have looked into this. I've heard prices of $150 per test. So for a single school district, that could be $100,000 a week just to be able to stay open. And maybe the scariest part is when you test 20% of those people, depending upon who tests positive and who they were exposed to, you could spend the $100,000 to test everyone and then close school anyway. Or not close school, but go to remote-only learning because of contact tracing and individuals being asked to quarantine. So I'm sure more and more districts in our region will be identified as these yellow cluster zones, and we continue to have conversations with medical facilities, both in our region and around the state, to try to develop a partnership that works for everyone. But I think at this point, most all school districts are committed to remote-only instruction in the event that they're identified within a cluster. And then there were changes that the governor announced regarding the travel restrictions. It revolves taking a test prior to leaving your destination for New York, and then quarantining for 3 days, and then being tested on the 4th day after returning to New York. So there's a lot of information out there. I just wanted to highlight that. Questions about those before I move on?
Just one quick question is, are you finding when the couple of cases, and thank goodness there haven't been a lot so far in our district, but is the contract tracing and direct contact causing staff coverage issues? Like you might have one student that could affect 25 teachers.
Sure. We've had 2 cases in school where we've had to conduct contact tracing, and both of them, the first one we were lucky, it impacted very few staff members. That was a combination of both the block schedule and the fact that the student had the same teacher for 2 different classes. So that was sort of one side of it. The other side of it was a student who sees many teachers and other professionals throughout the school day. And I think one elementary school student, we ended up identifying 78 individuals who were asked to quarantine for a single case. Now, obviously many of those are students, but from a staffing standpoint, we were able to, our clinical staff was still able to work from home, and they did telework. So we had some teachers that were out, and we had to bring in subs to cover, but we were able to do it, but it was close. And you hear lots of districts in the region that close because of staffing. Just they simply can't staff the building to keep everyone safe. So we have not yet been there, but it doesn't mean if the right kid who sees the right number of teachers were to test positive, or really maybe the scarier part is a teacher who tests positive and was exposed to other teachers during lunch or planning, that certainly would warrant many people being asked to quarantine. So we've done a lot of communication with our staff, asking that they not congregate, they not necessarily eat together, they plan virtually to reduce the possibility of losing a whole department at a time, which is certainly possible.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're entering a pretty dark time right now. The numbers are crazy. I mean, I was looking at the New York COVID app, and Putnam County is, in the region, is the highest as a full county, and I think it's 4% positivity rate yesterday.
Our 7-day positivity rate today is 4.1%.
So it's, you know, and it's only going to get compounded by all the colleges that are starting to discharge students prior to Thanksgiving, and a lot of students coming back before Thanksgiving because they don't want to quarantine for the 2 weeks before coming back. So it's happening now, where those students coming back, and if they bring it back to families, and families bring it back into the school districts before they start closing for holidays, we're going to see more and more. And I think it's, you know, I'm not the one who makes the decision, which is fine. I do not see a scenario where we don't start going full remote at some point through probably the new year or thereabouts. But it's, you know, the cases are higher now than they were since, was it June? Was the last time we had numbers that we have now? So it's, we all need to be concerned and vigilant about the 3 things that everybody's talking about: washing your hands, wearing a mask, staying away from people if you're not being safe. And I know it's tough. I mean, we were talking about the anxiety and the stress that students are having and everybody is having. I think it's real, and you know, I was just reading an article that the leading spreader right now are restaurants, small gatherings at homes. I don't remember what the third one was, but I mean, as we get into this, closing the windows, because it got cold today, closing the windows and staying inside, it's kind of incubating ourselves. Hopefully we can, I'm not trying to be on the high horse or anything. It's just, it's a reality that it's going to be tough for the next 6 months. Well, definitely the next 2 months. But it's kind of hard for me to imagine at this point, without a vaccine that is widely available, a scenario where we might not, probably will be hybrid, at least for, through the school year. I don't see, a scenario. Hopefully I'm wrong, but that's kind of where my expectation is, at least. I wouldn't be surprised at that.
And Jeremy, they're going to go, if we go fully remote, it's going to be the synchronous model that the fully remote students are using now, correct? Only teachers will be teaching from home?
Right, so that's correct. If we were forced to go through one of these clusters, right, there's obviously
Right,
many reasons
right.
why we could go to remote learning. But if it's because of the yellow becoming a micro cluster, it would mean everyone would be home. Even if we wanted to bring our staff in, we would have to test 20% of our staff. And we need consent and everything else that goes along with that. So, yeah, the expectation would be that they would follow a typical schedule. They would still receive a blend of synchronous and asynchronous assignments as they went through each of their classes. But obviously, having gone through this in the spring, we know it's much more complicated to be able to do that with everyone home than it sounds.
Right.
But that's certainly the intention, yes.
Section 1 just canceled winter sports at this point, correct? Or maybe it's not Section 1, whoever the authority is.
So in terms of winter sports, there's twofold. There's low risk and medium risk winter sports. Those, as of right now, can continue. Many of those sports are not sports that we carry. We have competitive gymnastics is one, but we have a student who participates with another team. Skiing, other sports like that we don't necessarily participate in, that can continue. Indoor track is one that we've recently added that as of right now is a go, but there's certainly some questions about how that works. As someone who's spent hundreds of hours in the Armory of Manhattan for winter track, I have questions how that would work.
It's a lot of people in a small space.
Yes, so we'll see where that goes. Swimming is another one, but obviously there's a struggle for swimming and access to pools and how that all works. Really, the big winter sports in terms of hockey, cheerleading, wrestling, and basketball are all considered high risk. And those sports, essentially, there's been no decision made on, which is a nice way of saying they still can't play in New York. And we don't have a timeline for if or when a decision will be made otherwise. But really, that lies on the governor's desk. He's the one who said it's not allowed. So until he says you may start, there's nothing the section or any individual district can do regarding those sports. So I'll just keep going. Let me know if you think of anything else. We also created a Q&A document. We obviously had an influx of cases this week. We had 4 cases really on Monday. So that precipitated obviously many questions rather than responding to individuals with answers. We thought it was prudent to create a Q&A document. So some of the topics or some of the items on that Q&A document which went out today, well, it talks about the 48-hour look-back period, and determining who is a contact, what factors go into deciding to close school, how long you need to quarantine, why not identify contacts outside of the 48 hours, can the district quarantine students without the Department of Health, why don't we further identify a positive individual, how many cases would cause school to close, who is identified as a contact, why don't contacts of contacts need to quarantine, and how are staff and community members notified of positive cases. So those are some of the questions we've heard both from faculty and from the community. So we just put it into a Q&A document form and sent that out this morning.
That's great.
Questions about any of those?
No.
So a couple other quick things. I had mentioned earlier that we sent the survey out for remote learners, providing them the opportunity to opt back into in-person instruction. As I wrote in the letter, those, depending upon the number of students that come back, will have a profound impact on our instructional model at the elementary school specifically, in terms of how classes are set up, where classes are located, how many classes need to be split. And once we have that survey data back, which will be prior to our next board meeting, we're going to have very serious conversations about how we move forward beginning in January. And do we have to split more sections? Do we have to create new classrooms in larger spaces like auditoriums and cafeterias and gyms? And how we go about meeting the need to support those in-person learners. We had our second after-school professional development day today. The other one was in October. We had our superintendent's conference day. Just to highlight some of the agenda items for superintendent's conference day, there was individual and team planning time. There was a lot of tech training that was provided by mostly our own staff on tools that help support remote learners. The vision for the day was about supporting the remote learners. There was building faculty meetings, and then K-12 professional learning meetings, guided reading, and other items like that. One of the topics that I wanted to discuss with the board this evening is we've had some preliminary conversations about the possibility of changing our school calendar to make December 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, the 3 days leading up to the holiday break in December, to make those remote-only learning days. The rationale for this change would be to create a 2-week break. That 2 weeks is essentially mirrors the quarantine period. It would, assuming that individuals take advantage of that opportunity and essentially quarantine, it would provide us sort of a fresh start to the school year in January without any risk of contact tracing or anything else going back. And I guess the other piece is, it would be terrible to have a student one of those 3 days or a staff member one of those 3 days test positive and have individuals forced to quarantine over the holidays. So that's just a topic for discussion.
Well, I don't know. I think it makes sense. I think that there are so many risks to going in for those 3 days that it makes sense to not be in-person learning those 3 days.
I agree. I think if you're going to pick a week to do it, that's the best week to do it.
Yes.
I definitely agree. My question, though, is I'm also as worried about 2 weeks after December 25th, when all the holiday gatherings come. So that brings us till the 8th. And now, if you read anything, you hear we may get some governor direction that we have no choice and have to do that. But I'm wondering, they're putting a lot of pressure on you superintendents to make those decisions. And I think as a board, we would be supportive of the decision to maybe create that week on the other end for the same purpose.
So
Meaning adding another 2 weeks to the end of the year. I mean, to the beginning of the year.
Or at least a week. I mean, thinking of December 25th as the big contact day. A week later is January 1st.
The other big
2
contact
weeks
day.
later is January 8th.
Right.
Okay. So maybe we'll start off with the December dates and then we can talk about what happens. The reality is, as I had mentioned before with the microclusters, if the numbers do not drop and they continue as they have in Putnam County, by the end of next week, we could be identified as a microcluster and be forced to close schools. So there is a possibility that schools are closed
How
before
long
we
does that
even get to Thanksgiving.
Specifically, how long would that closure be if we're still, once the numbers reverse?
Yeah, there's a metric, a number that it has to drop below. I'd have to look it up, maybe 2.5% in order to fall out of that designation. But there is a predetermined benchmark that we would have to reach.
But it's not just it's not just Putnam Valley, right? It's all of Putnam counties together.
All the numbers I'm giving are Putnam County, the entire county, not Putnam Valley.
So they're putting all of us, Mayapack, like all those districts together.
Yeah, if you remember, they started off identifying regions, so we're part of the Mid-Hudson region.
Right.
So in the beginning, it was if the region passes this threshold,
Right.
that you could reach a destination. And then we saw it start going to the county level, where individual counties could be identified. And now we've seen it go down to the individual town levels, right? We've
Right.
seen Port Chester most recently identified. So there's certainly a possibility that they could identify Putnam Valley, but knowing our size, it would seem foolish to identify Putnam Valley and not identify Cortland, where all the Putnam Valley people shop. Like it's, we're so small that it doesn't seem realistic that they would start identifying.
What about like if there was a cluster in like Mayapack or Carmel, which are, I don't know, would that affect us? Would we have to close because they're a Putnam County school?
Right. So those are excellent questions. Those are questions that we ask to our local Department of Health.
Great questions, Barbara.
It's the question that our local Department of Health
No
asked the
answers.
State Department of Health, and we're still awaiting questions.
Okay.
I think in Putnam County, Brewster is a large number of the cases are coming from that area. So it's entirely possible that Brewster itself is identified as a cluster, and it may not impact us. But when you're looking at the entire county numbers, we have to be prepared for the reality that they could just identify Putnam County as opposed to individual towns within Putnam County, just because we're so small. Just a couple other quick things. So we finished up our first round of classroom observations for the non-tenured staff. I know some of the clinical staff had mentioned this before. I was extremely impressed by the level of resiliency, the level of compliance in terms of mask wearing and social distancing, and really for the job our teachers have been able to do to quickly transition into an environment that nobody ever taught them anything about, which was simultaneously supporting in-person and remote learners. I was envious in some of the things that they were able to pick up, the tricks, the trade, and ways to engage both in-person and remote learners. In some classes I observed, when a question was asked, I wasn't even sure if the teacher was asking a kid who was in the class or a kid who was or a student who was at home until I heard the answer come either over the computer speaker or from the classroom. So I did want to just acknowledge the tremendous work that our teachers are doing in order to support both our in-person and our remote learners. The PVFT had dedicated benches to the Sperlings and Chris Krill. Those benches are located at the elementary school. You may notice at the Health and Wellness Center, our roof, the correctly colored roof, has begun installation. We actually expect a crane to be here tomorrow to quickly finish. And then the last agenda item I wanted to speak a little bit about, we were made aware of a solar farm that is being proposed in the property neighboring the schools. Do we have that to throw up there? So just for the community, we're just going to put up one picture to sort of give people a sense as to where it's located.
Sorry.
Thank you. So from this picture right here, you can see it's located on the property that runs along our property line. Off of Foothill is where access would be provided. And each of those little boxes is a solar array that would be used to generate the power. It doesn't, it resides in Yorktown. It's part of the Lakeland School District in Westchester County. So other than sharing a property line with this school district, it's really not in any other way within our jurisdiction. But we have begun preliminary conversations with engineers and architects regarding any possible adverse effects from an environmental standpoint that this may have on our property. Some of the items that we're exploring is the possibility of increased runoff once those trees are removed from that property. They're not there to absorb the water, and what happens to all that water. Obviously, there's a visual appearance piece. What does it look like when all those trees are gone? Is there any sound or any other sort of environmental electromagnetic radiation or anything else that we have to be concerned about? So at this time, we'll be contracting with someone just to sort of give us a report and review the plans, and we'll submit those to the town of Yorktown as they conduct their environmental study for this proposed project. Is there anything else the board, questions on that, or anything you want to add?
Keep us posted after that study, obviously, so.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Or, the security guard, do you want to talk about that now or later?
It's actually one of the questions. If you want, we could talk about it then.
Okay.
All right, we're doing that next, I think.
Okay.
All right, so I'd like to open it up to public comment on the listed agenda items. Maureen, are there any?
Yes, I have them. So many of them are COVID related, so
Okay.
we'll consider that part of the agenda item. There's also the security guard one, but once we get started, we might as well keep going. So
Yeah, I agree.
So what I'll do is I'll just sort of give a general overview of the question and then any feedback I have, and then I'll open it up to the board before going to the next one. So the first question has to do with guidelines regarding wearing masks. The state guidelines say that you need a mask or 6 feet of social distance. And the question is, why do we require both? So I pulled up a document from the state. This was actually sent out on July 22nd as an update to the guidance that they originally sent on July 13th, which was 150 pages long. And this, I'll just read an excerpt from it. It says, as a baseline, face coverings are required to be worn anytime or place that individuals cannot maintain appropriate social distancing. So that's sort of, you have to wear it unless you can social distance. But the next sentence says, further, face coverings are strongly recommended by the Department of Health at all times. So obviously, our promise to the community from day one has been to do whatever we can do to keep everyone as safe as possible. And if the State Department of Health is going to tell me that something related to a pandemic is strongly recommended, I don't think I can do my job without following strongly recommended when it comes from the State Department of Health. Anything else on that? Good. All right, the next question has to do with our COVID coordinator. So myself and Dr. Doherty are co-COVID coordinators. So if anyone has any COVID coordinator questions, that's a tongue twister, you can certainly send it our way. The next question speaks to, within the plan, it says the COVID coordinator is responsible for continuous compliance and any phased-in reopening activities. More specifically, what's our plan and timeline for a full reopening of school? So we obviously had a phased-in approach at the beginning of the school year. We started with different grades at different times. It's hard to even remember back that far. And that was something that we certainly oversaw, and then we ramped up to get to what is our full implementation of our reopening plan at this point in time. In terms of a full reopening of school, it's not my belief that we can be in compliance with the state guidelines and fully reopen schools. We simply cannot fit all of the students in the classrooms while maintaining social distancing, which is a requirement of the plans. So at this time, we don't have any plans to fully reopen school unless the state changes their guidelines, given what's happening right now in terms of the positivity rate. That doesn't seem likely to happen anytime soon. But that being said, we are continuously exploring opportunities to bring back more students. We, I think, have done a very commendable job in bringing back as many students as we have, far more than many of our neighboring school districts. I know in middle school and high school, some want those students in more, and those conversations are ongoing, whether we can better utilize that Monday flex day, whether there's opportunities to bring back additional students. Something many people may not know is the number of students in collaborative settings in the middle school and the high school that we've brought back full time. And that's something that many districts haven't done that. So it's not even 50% of our students, it's a greater percentage of our students are in school every day in the middle school and the high school, but those students obviously take up seats in classrooms, which reduces the ability to bring back additional students. So we've explored a lot of sort of creative solutions regarding maximizing the number of students we can bring back. I am proud to say I want as many students as we can safely get in our buildings as often as possible, and I think our plan speaks to our commitment to that stance. But the key part there is as safely possible, and we can't bring back more students then we could safely accommodate. The reality is all of the work that we've been doing, the protocols we have in place have been working. We haven't had a single case of COVID spreading within our schools. And I think that speaks both to everyone's compliance with the protocols and the establishment of the protocols that we have. So I'm hesitant to move away from something that we know is working, but I certainly am eager to get as many students back into the building as we safely can.
Dr. Luft, is there a scenario in where we think it's the use of the fitness, the wellness center, come January, February, might expand some of our spacing?
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, that would be a large open space, and we'd have to explore what we could do in there. Yeah, we anticipate that being a space that'll be available to us the second semester. More likely than not, it would probably mean moving the physical education classes into there and utilizing the gym as more of a classroom space, yeah. So the next question speaks to, I think I spoke a little bit about this, bringing students back for the Monday to every other day. And I have mentioned that's something that I've actually recently had conversations with Dr. Incheri about.
And that would not necessarily be that their days would schedule, but they would say alternate that Monday, for example?
Yeah, so there's a couple of thoughts. One would be, obviously with this A cohort, B cohort, is you can rotate each of those cohorts through that Monday. Right. Another possibility is you can identify specific cohorts of students, which may be a subset of students that we could bring in. Obviously that creates some cross pollination of cohorts, which then could expose a larger number of students to being quarantined. So that's something that we have to be cognizant of. But yeah, most likely it would be either the A cohort or the B cohort coming in that day.
Okay.
Because was it Lakeland or Yorktown or some other school that was doing it and then stopped doing it? Was having part of a cohort coming in every other Tuesday or every other Wednesday, whatever it happened to be?
Yeah, there's a couple districts that have changed it, but I guess what I would caution is some of those districts had that day as like an asynchronous only day, and they were using it for professional development for their staff. So I think specifically for Yorktown, they were using it as a professional development day where teachers were posting assignments, but they weren't following a schedule or running any live classes. And now they're moving to that being more of an instructional day, where we've always had, that Monday's always been an instructional day for us, although remote, but the students have still followed their 9-period schedule at the high school and participated directly with their teachers. We have that professional development time built into the afternoon of each day. That's sort of our 1-hour shortened student day, is so we have that professional development and planning time at the end of the school day. So that's one of the changes. But you're right, districts are starting to move away from what was more asynchronous professional development time to more synchronous and in-person learning time on those flex days. Oops. Next question. So the next question talks to surveying to gauge the community, their feelings for a full return to school. So we have not sent that survey out. We have surveyed the remote learners to see how many of them plan to return to school in January. And again, we can't accommodate a full return to school at this time within the guidelines. So if the guidelines change that would allow us to bring back all students, that's something we would certainly consider. But at this point, I don't want to survey people if I can't accommodate their responses.
And would we only look at right now per school, or say maybe if 9th grade could all come in? Like, would we look at it per grade also?
Of course, yeah. We've looked at any way we can think about breaking up students and bringing them in is something that we would happily consider.
I should say 5th and 9th, so those 2 grades.
I think the current entering the holiday season kind of puts a little bit of a damper on this plan, but I'm glad, we're all on the same page about the more students we can get in, the better.
Yeah, I'm sure if this was a conversation in September,
right,
it would probably be much different than it is now. So the next couple questions regard contact tracing. The first one is, if we're 6 feet apart and wearing masks, why are so many people being identified as contacts? I mean, again, that is exclusively a responsibility of the Department of Health. We do not identify anyone as a contact or ask anyone to quarantine. We simply just provide the requested information to the Department of Health, who makes those determinations. And the next question similarly wants to know, once a person tests negative with a normal, which I think is a PCR test, why aren't they able to return? And again, that's a Department of Health guidelines regarding the quarantine period. I guess the fear is you could test negative and still have the virus in you and just not have it be active. And it could take a longer period of time to become active. But again, that's not a decision that we have the ability to make. And then the last question, to Jeanette's point before, has to do with the security guard. Discussing the security guard on the turf, the purpose, and the purpose of that position. So I can speak to the fact that the use of the turf has always been by permit only, and it's been maybe not as enforced as it should have been in the past. What we saw during the school closure is we were one of the only districts, I would venture to say the only district, that did not close all of our fields throughout the spring. And part of the reason for that is we have a long-standing tradition of having our track accessible to community. And obviously, with people being locked in their houses during the day, we wanted to provide an outlet for them to get outside and exercise. So it's not as easy for us just to close our fields, but still leave our track open. So we made the decision to keep our facilities open in the spring. What that translated to, when you're the only facility that's open, is we're getting many, many more people here that are not necessarily obeying the guidelines of social distancing or mask wearing or cleaning up after themselves or anything like that. And next thing you know, we had 50, 60 individuals gathering and playing games. We had baseballs and lacrosse balls flying across the field and across the track, nearly missing walkers. So there was a lot of concerns regarding liability and injury, and I think that's what precipitated the board's decision to bring back the security guard prior to the start of fall sports. We've always had a security guard on duty during sports seasons. That's nothing new. They were actually really helpful this year, given the limitations that Section 1 put on spectators, is to have someone up on the top of the driveway to stop, say, visiting team parents, where we know they're not going to be allowed in. Let's stop them on top of the hill before they walk all the way down the hill and get to the field, and then that confrontation ensues down there. So the position has definitely taken on a new role in the midst of COVID and in the midst of the limitations that are in place. But having a security guard on site during after school for all 3 seasons is something. Typically we have 2 actually on campus to support the sports and the parents that are there.
So I think the question came up, a group that had a permit to participate but arrived early and was turned back.
So I don't know anything about that. I've never heard that before.
Okay.
If someone has a permit to use it, there would be no reason why.
I think the specifics was the practice was rained out. It was rained, so the team as a whole was not going on, but one coach and about 9 of the children did want to come in, and the security guard did not interpret that as being the group who had the permit. So they were not permitted on. So, I mean, I think that this is a nitpicky one specific instance, but I guess my thing is I was absolutely in agreement back in September about having the security guard there, because we view our facility as protecting our taxpayers and our students. So wear and tear on the turf, everything else, we can't be all things for all people. But, we just had the whole clinical team department. We want our kids to have a place to go that's safe. So if we keep away people who don't belong to our districts, I think we need to let our kids, within safety guidelines, use the facilities as much as possible. If they want to throw a football or play basketball instead of going to the back of the Cortland Town Center and drinking, I'm in support of that.
Especially if there's a established permit, if there's,
Right, if there's I mean, I think it's a bigger question if 9 kids want to come and practice their lacrosse. But if it's an organization.
With the permit, it's certainly not an issue, but the reality of the situation is it's either open or closed.
Right.
Like if there's no one there, we can't prevent other students from other districts coming there. We can't stop adults from coming there. We can't stop anyone else from going there. If we don't have someone there, we can't enforce social distancing. We can't require individuals to wear masks. We can certainly go back in that direction, but I just want to be honest, like it's not, we're going to limit 9 kids in our school to go there and throw a football. It's, the field's going to be open.
Right.
And whoever shows up is going to be able to show up and play, because we can't possibly patrol who's in our school, what are you doing, I need to see ID. Like that, I would never put someone in that situation to start identifying individuals as being. And the other piece is we have, a lawsuit underway resulting from an injury, one of our students on our turf. If those 9 kids on our turf playing football, if one of them gets injured, we're liable for that injury because they don't have a permit and they're not carrying their own insurance. And that's the real reason why we have individuals cover their own insurance. So if someone has a permit, that means you have your own insurance, and you certainly should have access to the field. I would never argue that. But anyone, even if you're a student, if you're on that field without a permit, the liability rests on the district, and that's really a board decision. If we're willing to assume that liability, we can certainly open our fields to our students to use them.
Where I promote permits, so I would promote permits, obtaining the permits.
It's
with the security guard, I mean, that's what I mean.
We do live in this litigious and liability perspective. We don't want kids getting hurt on our fields, but it's difficult because we want to be the place kids can gather.
I totally understand it.
So what currently then, we do still have the security guard as of now.
Right, well, fall sports are still underway, so yeah.
Right, okay. So we have the security guard, but if a group has a permit.
So, there's a process in place for the permits. If someone has the permit, they could use the field. If someone with a permit was told they couldn't use the field, that was simply a mistake. But one phone call to Mr. Burrow or someone could certainly remedy that situation if it was in fact a group that had a permit to be there.
Okay, and does the security guard, are they empowered to reach out and make that phone call?
Of course.
Okay.
Typically Mr. Burrow's here.
Right.
Because there's some kind of sports going on, so I'd say 90% of the time he would be on site and you can connect with him with the walkie-talkie.
And how long is the security guard on duty for now? Just through the sporting event or?
His hours have been, I don't know exactly, we shifted them slightly once the fall sports began, but he's here till 7 or 8 o'clock. Okay. Originally he was here till 9.
Okay.
So is there any other comments? I think we have, well, I just want to finish that one up. So I know at least one board member is interested in reopening.
Well, no, I agree that, I'm not saying no security guard, I'm saying that if you have permits, you should be available to go out on the field.
Of course.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Depending on, without making the judgment of how the permit was utilized. As long as the insurance is covered, is what really the permit does, is it ensures the liability of somebody else's coverage, then the kids should be able to use the field.
You said there was another question? I have heard about the rumor, but I would call it nothing more than a rumor. I don't have any reason to believe the state will actually do that. They could do whatever they want, but other than hearing it through the grapevine, I have not heard anything that would suggest that will actually happen.
And I've heard as many rumors that the governor is most likely not to take that order away, they want to put all of the ownership on your shoulders. So,
That sounds more accurate.
yeah, so although, I did also hear that rumor, I heard that the governor and the New York government has deflected all of that to local.
Right. I mean, that's not to say that, as we mentioned before, with our conversation regarding the clusters, that we
Right.
couldn't be identified and be forced to close.
Mhm.
But other than being a rumor, I don't have any information that would suggest the governor will make the decision to preemptively close schools between Thanksgiving and Christmas or following Christmas.
Right.
Now that I said that, he may announce it tomorrow.
What time is it?
I got an email.
I do not have an inside line.
All right.
You're welcome.
Okay, so does that bring us to new business? Yes, it does. So, Mr. Ferraro, can I ask you to start with number 1?
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the second reading of revisions to the Code of Conduct Policies 5300 through 53.75 as per document number 9721 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second?
Questions or comments? This is what we discussed before. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 2.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation for the purpose of retirement of senior office assistant Christine Wallach from the district effective June 30th, 2021, as per document number 99-21 attached to the agenda and official minutes of the meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
I'll just preemptively, I want to thank both Christine, Lori, and Deborah, who are the next two, for their many years of dedicated service to our school district, and we will greatly miss all of them.
It's always when you open the agenda 2 or 3 days before and you get a shock to your system when you see a name that has been here when your child was 5 and 6 and 7. And as always, we're very happy for them, not always as happy for us, but it's the circles.
It's that wealth of knowledge that you know.
Right, exactly. So we will acknowledge, as we have in the spring, retirements.
We lose a lot of institutional memory in this one.
Right.
Yes. We have to vote, right? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 2. 3.
3. Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation for the purpose of retirement of senior school bus driver Lori Cara from the district effective June 30th, 2021, as per document number 100/21 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 4.
Resolved on recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation for the purpose of retirement of bus driver Deborah Parsons from the district, effective at the end of 2020-2021 school year, as per document 101/21, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 5.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Eric Keogh to a probationary appointment as a school monitor effective November 16th, 2020, with a probationary period of 52 weeks, November 16th, 2021, at the elementary school on step 1 of the CSEA salary schedule.
Second?
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 6.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve and authorize the superintendent of schools to enter into a supplemental memorandum of agreement, SMOA, with the Putnam Valley Federation of Teachers, the PVFT, related to the possible impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and coaching activities as per document number 102-21 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. That moves us on to the consent agenda. Number 1.
Resolved to approve the consent agenda items 2 through 7 as presented to the board at this meeting.
Second,
Questions or comments?
we're approving 2 agreements with the Carmel Central School District for 2 students with special needs. We're approving a club at the high school for the fall drama. We're approving additions to the substitute tutor list. We're approving CSE, CPSE placements. We're approving additional hours for a staff member to facilitate the planning for Pride activities and initiatives. And we're approving the sale or auction or disposal of a 2000 Ford model truck that we no longer have use for.
All in favor? Aye. All right, Dr. Luft, the spotlight topics for upcoming meetings?
So I know for December, we have Ms. Pastretta lined up. So she's going to do a couple different professional development, and her and Ms. Soprano will be doing the anti-racism committee work. So those are the 2 that I know are coming up in December. Did I leave any out there, Mo? All right, there are more.
And financial plan and science research.
Oh, for science research, I know Mr. Mercero is going to come and present, not the students like we typically have, but he's going to talk about the topics in which the students are studying. Jill will talk about the multi-year financial plan.
With that, Mr. Zuban's going to do that for science research?
Science research.
Okay.
Mr. Zupan's going to come do it, but I don't think the students are joining him.
Okay.
And then in January, looking forward, there was a conversation regarding history curriculum. So I know Ms. Pastretta is working with Dr. Incheri and others, Mr. McCarty, to have some presenters come and talk a little bit about how we are teaching history within Putnam Valley. And then obviously we would then be in the budget season. And there'll be a budget presentation at just about every meeting.
And I don't know how he's going to do the science research students, but I will.
Yes.
So the students are going to be virtual, yeah, because their explanation and their plea is always better than the adults doing it, so.
The
So
most
I was hoping he would
right.
work that in somehow. Okay.
The most impressive part is
Right.
their explanation of their passion
Right.
of the topic.
Right. I just didn't want to lose that in
Right.
No.
Right.
this virtual world.
And just along those same lines, I remember her congratulating one of the student speakers after graduation, the 3-part graduation with the middle speaker, and she attributed science research as her poise, as where her confidence and poise of having to answer questions and speak came from. So I agree, Barbara, that's an important component of the program.
Okay.
Okay. Are any more public comment? Everybody look at your emails. Any other public comment on any topic at all? Okay. All right, so at this point, I'd like a resolution to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I'd like, on behalf of the Board of Education, to wish everyone a safe, healthy Thanksgiving. And stay well, follow guidelines, and let us keep our kids in school.